really excited to be the first event that's ever happened in the WeWork space. How cool is this venue? Yeah. When we were here a couple weeks ago and we were looking at spaces, as soon as the elevator door opened and our team saw the paintings, the fox is what got me. We were like, yeah, we're doing the event here. That's great. And James was like, we'll have you. So thank you so much for coming as part of Social Media Week to the Power of a Podcast event. Tonight we are going to be talking about podcasts. If you were here at Social Media Week at Glengold today or yesterday, you know that actually came up quite a bit. A lot of people are looking at this medium, they're interested in their medium, they don't really understand it, but they're curious. And so tonight we're going to answer some of those questions. As podcast audiences have continued to rise, more and more brands and marketers are putting their content into the ears of their fans everywhere. And so joining me on this panel are going to be people who know a thing or two about podcasting and how to market them. But before we invite them up, I'm going to play a little icebreaker game. That's why I want you to be seated. It's part of it. So my name is Sam, and I am the moderator for tonight. I am the host of the Freedom Lifestyle podcast series and online community. And when I was younger, I always enjoyed the game Simon Says. Do you remember Simon Says? Cool, so I'm not going to explain it. Great. But my name is Sam, so we're going to do Sam Says. And I'm going to say a series of statements, and if it applies to you, all you have to do is stand up. If you're in the back, because you don't want to sit at the front, you can just raise your hand. Okay? So stand up if you already have a podcast. I'd be scared. This is like, you should be ready. You should be like, yes. Stand up if you are thinking of starting a podcast for a business. Cool. Stand up if you're thinking of starting a podcast for a creative project. Nice. Doesn't always have to be business. Stand up if you were at Glengold, either today or yesterday, for Social Media Week. Nice. It's good. We'll get an endorphin or two. You're automatically going to enjoy this even more. And stand up if you were at the Thompson last night for that party. Amazing. 2 nights in a row, we're doing it. And final question, stand up if you're ready to learn about the power of a podcast. Amazing. I'm going to join my amazing panelists to join me on these cool stools with all of his plants. We've really taken advantage of the foliage here. So come on up. Hop it up, maybe? So I figure, who better to introduce themselves than the person themselves? So I'm just going to pass the mic, and I'm going to have all of you kind of introduce yourselves and maybe what drew you to the panel today and podcasting, and we'll start with that.
Hi everyone, my name is Takara. I'm the host of the Blue Mills Tech podcast called I'll Go First. I'll keep this very brief. I've been in journalism for a very long time. I've written about tech. I appear on CBC and CTV as a tech contributor. And so the reason that I wanted to be here is because I've been talking about tech, whether I've been paid or not, for a very, very long time. And I'm so excited to be in a room with so many creative people who want to launch their own podcast and kind of share the knowledge that I've learned, sometimes easy, sometimes hard, with you guys today.
I'm Matt Sutton. I'm a brand manager at Facebook. I'm here because I personally am passionate about podcasts, but up until about a year ago, I hadn't really focused on it professionally. I've done everything from paid search, programmatic display, to direct mail, and then 43% of podcast listeners spending at least 5 hours a week on podcasts. It struck me as something that I wanted to focus on a little bit more, and I've been really diving into that for the past year and working with Dan here, so excited to be here.
I'm Dan Misener. I work for a company called Pacific Content. We're a really weird company because the only thing that we do is make podcasts with brands. We make shows with companies like Charles Schwab and Dell Technologies. We make computers. We work with companies like Prudential. They do life insurance in the United States of America. We work with companies like Slack. They make a big words or two to your colleagues. So we do podcasts with brands and we're really learning about the intersection of audio, great storytelling, and business methods.
Can everybody hear okay? Yeah? Okay. No?
No.
Maybe can someone at the end just ask me to turn up the mic volume a little bit? Part of being the first group to have an event at WeWork is you're the guinea pig. We only have one mic working tonight, but I'm going to project and I'm going to let you guys share the mic. Does that sound okay? Yeah. So the first question I have is for Matt. Given that it is social media week, a lot of people in the room probably have social accounts, invest a lot of time, probably money to grow your audience. Maybe you have a blog that you can grow in that traffic on month over month for several years. Maybe an email newsletter. And now you want to get into podcasting. What are some ways we can migrate these audiences that we've already invested in, that we want to take with us to this new platform in a way that will get them to come?
Yeah, so two words, content and conversation. So it is intuitive, but also not to think about not audio but video when talking about podcasts. So video is expensive for many of us who are starting podcasts, or even brands who are starting podcasts. The thought of adding a video element to the marketing or to the content itself can 10x the budget. But there are increasing amounts of digital first and mobile first, even apps that allow you to take snippets of audio content and make actually pretty compelling feed and stories friendly video content. So I think the first thing I would say is for your audience, you've already invested in them, you have a passionate following, take advantage of those channels. And if you're thinking about if you have a podcast, cut that content down. We work with a lot of advertisers who segment creative to 100, 150 different versions. And it's just little snippets, little previews to hook the audience with autoplay and video. And then the other is join the conversation. So thinking about your audience, if you engage them on your own channels, they're also elsewhere and they're having conversations. We've seen some brands have success with creating an Instagram presence around a podcast, having an active Twitter following for the host or for guests, or even joining a Reddit channel or doing an AMA for a specific subreddit that's an interest group related to your podcast. So I'd say those two things.
Cool. I like the idea of creating multiple pieces of content out of one piece of content. So yes, it's an audio file, but how will we convert it? Given that we love tools here, so if you Google, what are some tools that you use that?
Absolutely. So I'll put a shameless plug. There's a free tool that we have called Creative Hub, which allows you to preview an ad. So you don't have to buy ad, you don't have to do anything with that, but you can go in and upload an existing audio clip and add stock imagery and turn it into a 15-second video ad. There's autoplay. I'm trying to remember if there's a product by Adobe. It's a light version of their desktop tool. And then yes, Spark. Those two are the two that I would recommend.
Dan, do you want to add anything in terms of how you can migrate from starting investment?
Into the middle. I think I just add on to what's been said. I think it's important to utilize your time correctly and properly. So even with the podcast at the Globe, everything we do the content is used for something else at the end of the day. So when we have a podcast, we actually have sound bites that we actually cut up, and it's placed on Instagram, it's placed on our sponsor pages, it's placed on my page. And additionally, whenever we're doing our shoot, we also have a photographer who's taking photos as well, so that can be utilized on Reddit, that can be utilized on other social accounts. Whenever you're doing something, it's important, even if this is for right now free, it's always important to maximize whatever time is spent on that project and get as much out of it as you can. So what I do is I invoice my time. If I'm spending an hour and a half creating a podcast, how am I going to pay myself back at the end of the shift or whatever?
And hot potato, is that what it is? Yeah, okay. So this question is for Dan. I know you read these reports too because you blog about them, but Edison always does the consumer podcast report, which just came out. And while it's been increasing, the number is 45% of people in North America have listened to a podcast before. The number sounds big, but actually it's only 45% of people have listened to a podcast before. So it's still a pretty big gap in terms of who's even interested in this, medium. And I know we're all podcasters here, that's why we're here at this event. But if you remember the first time you listened to a podcast, it's not that intuitive. The apps are kind of annoying to navigate. There's other apps that are better than the Apple one. So my question for you, Dan, is how can we make podcasting more appealing to our audiences, and how also can we make it easier for them to start listening and grow that number from 45%?
So I agree with you completely that there is a ton of friction in the system, and a big part of the challenge is getting people over those speed bumps because it is fiddly, it is fussy, it is still way too hard to start listening to podcasts. And I think as people who are longtime listeners or longtime producers, we tend to forget that. So I agree, there is a lot of friction, and the more that we can do to reduce friction, the better. That said, as marketing people, I think often we get too far down the road of asking the question, how do we get more people to listen to our show or watch our videos or read the stuff that we produce, and we don't ask the question, why would they want to listen to our shows or read our stuff or watch our videos? And as much as I try and spend my time and attention on how making it as easy as possible for people to listen, I think the bigger, more important question is why. You mentioned the Edison research, and that 45% of people in North America who have ever listened to a podcast seems relatively low. It's even lower when you look at the number of people who are regular listeners, people who report listening in the last month or so. It's somewhere around a quarter of the population, depending on whether you're looking at the US or Canada. And when you compare that quarter of the population that has listened to a podcast in the last month to the number of people who report being aware of podcasts as a thing, which is huge, that gap, that is, I think, the really challenging piece. And the answer to it is more diverse content, making stuff that looks a lot less like the first 10 years of podcasting, which was dominated by public radio rebroadcasts or stories that feel like old-style radio stories, and making more stuff that is designed specifically to appeal to a broader audience. Give people a reason why, and they will jump through the hurdles to get to the good stuff.
So two things on that. Millennials don't buy brands, they buy brands. The idea that, and I mean, the point of this is to talk about how brands could invest in a podcast, right, primarily. And there is this compulsion to think of it as another marketing channel. And in any conversations with Dan and consulting on a few projects, the focus has to be on something that is additive and not added to the noise, and something that never explicitly pitches the product. Because the minute that you have a sales angle to it, if you really want to strive for like top 10 business podcasts or whatnot, that listener will tune out. So first and foremost, focusing on the storytelling, but also something that adds to the ecosystem. It's pretty intuitive, but a lot of folks don't think about that. They're thinking of it as a marketing channel first, not a more of like a branding effort.
Can you hear a bit better now? Is it better? Yeah. Takara, my next question is for you. We recently become a host of the Global Sales Tech Podcast. It's the top tech podcast in Canada. It's very impressive. I think another big gap for people in the room, and not only if you agree, is kind of the technical requirements of starting a podcast. How do I get it from like my voice to someone here on Apple iTunes, and like how does that even work, and what kind of gear do I need to invest in, and how much do I need to spend, and especially for people who want to do it themselves, and who kind of want to make it on their own versus going with a company, maybe content, if you help me do a little podcast. So my question for you is, what was that gap like for you for like learning how to be a podcast host? You also produce the show as well. And can you talk a little bit about what kind of gear you're using for your show?
Yeah. So the gap for me is it's a great question, because for myself, I primarily before this I didn't really I have never hosted a podcast. For a while though, I've been a tech contributor for CPC and CTV, so I'm very familiar with talking in front of an audience or on live TV, and so I don't get flustered as much as maybe someone who is new to the business. But I think when it comes to podcasting, one of the things that I had to learn was the fact that as a host or a producer, it's your job to do the research and make sure your guests feel comfortable. And I think that's something that a lot of people overlook. They think, I'm just going to sit down and talk to someone and not do any pre-interviews or any work before that. That's a huge component, because again, you have to make sure you utilize the time that you have to produce the best product you can. And as the panel said, you have to create something that's adding some type of education or some element that you wouldn't find anywhere else. It's not a branding or a marketing tool. The reason the Tech Podcast does so well is because Duolingo was highlighting Canadian entrepreneurs. All of the podcasts before that were looking at the US, and we have so much talent here. And as many of you probably know, Canada, and Toronto in particular, is somewhat of a leader in this space right now. When it comes to gear, I must say that the reason that I'm so fortunate to be with The Globe is because they have a top-line studio that we work out of, which has been outfitted with all of the microphones and material that you need. So it makes it that much easier. If you are starting in the podcast industry and you want to create your own, I'd say do a lot of research. There are so many free YouTube videos. I watched dozens and dozens of hours based on that, just learning how to produce and cut. And as well, I think it's really important that you make sure to follow and listen to other podcasts to see what they're doing right. There's no need in reinventing the wheel if there's something that's working. I think as well, I know everyone here might not have a huge budget, and I understand that, but it's important when you're starting out that you have a podcast of quality. And so if you can, working and hiring people who know what they're doing is important. You only get one shot. It's your reputation at stake. So if you're going to do something in your living room and there's a huge echo, that will turn off potential listeners and sponsors and brands at the same time.
I like your tip around making your guests comfortable. I know that on my show, one of the first things I tell my guests is I spend a lot of time post-production, editing. I'll get rid of those I'll get rid of those awkward silences. So I say, I ask you a question. Sometimes this is real life where you have to answer, say the first thing comes to your mind, take a second, think about it. I'll get rid of any awkward Any tips on how to make guests comfortable that you do too, that you guys feel as well?
So I do, I'm an avid fan of doing your research. So we had a podcast with the founder of Ritual, the food application. And I remember I was doing research, I was going through his tweets like a cycle from a year and a half ago. And I was like, so I remember we were talking, this got cut, we were talking about soup or something like that. And I was like, oh, I remember your favorite soup is this. And she's like, how do you know? I was like, because on April 22nd and 20. And it's just like, whoa. And I'm like, I like that soup too though. And that just created an organic conversation. So I think putting your guests at ease is just doing the research. There's no substitute for doing the work. You just have to do it. If you have the money, you can hire a researcher. I personally like to do the research myself because I want to feel like I have the capacity to carry a conversation. And you have to be organic and you're on the spot, and I don't want to waste my producer's time as well. So that's one of the ways I put messages at ease.
what you want to get back from them. So I think the power of the podcast is its narrative bandwidth. Podcasts are amazing for telling stories. I think podcasts are really powerful when it comes to emotion and making you feel things. I think podcasts are terrible for information, stuff that should be better conveyed in a written document, in a spreadsheet, right? So podcasts have emotion and story going for them. So what you want is emotion and story when you're interacting with your guests. Give them that. Feed them that. If they're coming into the studio, spend the first couple of minutes. If you want them to talk in stories, we need to talk in stories to them. Right? So talk about something that happened to you. Talk about how that made you feel. Right? There's almost a mirror effect that things like that happen, and I think the work that you do before you hit record can absolutely, to your point about research, pay off in space.
Now you know a lot about marketing. We talked about maybe some organic marketing strategies that someone can use to, build awareness of their podcast or build their audience. Maybe something that could either complement a paid strategy or something that could even work as a standalone if they don't have a budget for paid.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is probably where I can provide the most help. So there are three things that come to mind. The first is Jaden Smith posted and this got some press this summer, but it was the first time an entire album was posted on Instagram. And it is not something that any brands, any creators, any folks, who are trying to sell something had thought to do first. But that decision was made because it's a place to discover, and that's where the audience and the following was. So that is another way of saying, thinking of these different channels in a different way. The other would be, and this is more kind of like on a podcast hack side, but actually just recently Spotify just launched a extension for Instagram. So if you're a brand and you have an Instagram account of any size, and you're posting in the stories, you could post a story about your upcoming podcast episode launch, swipe up, and it would push out to Spotify, linked into that specific episode, and start playing. This is something that a lot of folks in the industry are not aware of yet. We just haven't done a good job of talking about it. But I think that it is something that could be huge. Dan and I have talked about this a lot for organic strategies, for example. And then finally, thinking about complementing paid. So there's two things. There is a listen now button. So when targeting your audiences or trying to expand your audiences on social, on Facebook and Instagram, you can pick listen now as a call to action. And to Dan's point earlier about podcasting, traditionally there's a lot of friction involved, especially for people who are not in the ecosystem. With the launch of Google Podcasts, we now have the ability to reach basically all devices, all Android. Google Podcasts is natively installed on most versions of Android that are out there now, and iOS Podcasts on Apple. So, in thinking about lowering that barrier to entry, you can put an awareness message out there or complement your existing marketing strategy and sub-segment and target based on device. So tune into my podcast on Apple Podcasts. They see this in their feed, they tap on the button, and it goes directly into that episode and starts playing. No landing pages, no friction. So I think those are kind of hacky things that have just kind of developed over the past year that I think are huge, increasingly important for brands of any size.
Yeah, let's talk about the new and noteworthy category in Apple Podcasts. I think that gets a lot of hype. We hear a lot of things about the algorithm, 8 weeks from the time our episode goes live, we feature the new noteworthy. Should we be paying attention to this? Is it all the rage? And if so, what are some ways that we can tee our podcast launch up to get featured in new noteworthy?
So there's a ton of very bad information out there. There are a lot of really crummy blog posts that are the equivalent of get-rich quick schemes for your show. Just be aware that this is such a spammy, scammy world full of bad advice. That being said, it's useful when you think about Apple Podcasts in particular to separate out the pieces that are under Apple's direct editorial control and the pieces that are controlled by the algorithm. So if you can imagine the front page of desktop iTunes, there's the big hero section at the very top called the flow case. That is programmed by human beings. There is an editorial team who picks what goes there. Same thing for New and Noteworthy. New and Noteworthy is a collection of shows chosen by human beings who work at Apple. Same thing for what they call collections, which are groups of shows that you sometimes see together around Halloween, spooky stories, that kind of thing. So the flow case at the very top, the New and Noteworthy, and the collections, those are all chosen by human beings. There are people at Apple who do that work. Their names are not hard to find, and you can reach out to them. Something important to note is that Apple Podcasts in Canada has a different editorial team than Apple Podcasts in the United States, which has a different editorial team than the Apple Podcasts in Australia and New Zealand and all around the world. So if you're making English language content, think outside of Canada. Think about pitching Apple outside of Canada if your show has residence outside of Canada. Now, charts. This is the top 10. Top 10 is what they show on the front page. This is what I think a lot of people have talked about Festival Bus that's being hacked and gamed, and I think Apple is aggressively working to weed out some of the scammy stuff. This is an area where there's an especially large amount of bad advice. There is an algorithm that picks what goes to the top of the list. When you look at that top podcasts chart, it is not top all-time shows. It is tuned for recency and hotness, for lack of a better word. And appearing at the top of one of those lists, particularly the top 10, is a really great thing because there is a virtuous cycle that can happen because people use the charts, particularly the top 10 of the charts, to discover their next thing to listen to. So getting onto the top 10 can be a really great thing because it starts off this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. How do you get on the top charts? Everybody should write this down. Send useful traffic to Apple. That's it. That's it. What is useful traffic? Useful traffic is traffic that people tap on or click on and results in a meaningful action. That is something playing an episode, that is hitting subscribe. That is what they have the ability to track, and all indication suggests that that algorithm, which Apple's not going to give us the secrets to, is based on meaningful interactions on their platform. If you want to end up on the top podcast charts, send lots of meaningful traffic to Apple. Highly qualified people who are going to listen to your show and engage with it. That's the secret. It's a pretty important secret.
Takara, can you talk a little bit about what your launch plan was? When did the first episode come out?
Yeah. The first episode came out in September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have anybody listened to that podcast yet?
I hope so. Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. What was the launch plan for something like this?
Yeah, the launch plan is it happened really fast. Because there was a lot of stuff that had to happen before the first podcast even launched. A lot of pre-interviews, a lot of research, all of that stuff. And then once that was completed, that's when you kind of saw the banner ads that were taking place on the Good Mail. There was like days in the paper, which my grandmother was very excited about. And then a lot of events that I would go to. And so that's the other part of promoting a podcast is it's not just sitting back and waiting for your company or your team or whatever to do the work and make it popular. You have to go out and sell it yourself. And because I've been in the tech community for so long, and I run a non-profit called Venture Kids that helps kids from underserved areas learn how to code and learn. So because I've been doing all that stuff for years, I'm authentic when I'm talking about tech. It's not something I just decided to dive into because I thought this would make me money. This is something that I've been writing about for 10 years. It's something I do and volunteer at on my free time. And so for the launch, and I think that's why the Globe and Mail approached me about this opportunity, because I wasn't working for them. I left my job to do this, to work for them. And for promotion, it was just organic for me. Like everyone who follows me on Twitter, they know I love tech. They know I write about tech. And so promoting it is just me being and doing exactly what I've always done. It's retweeting, it's talking about it, it's going to events, it's meeting entrepreneurs. And so the launch was less work in a sense. It was just me living my day to day. The Globe just kind of logged on to, I mean, it was easy for them in a good way. It was easy for them because they're just like, hey, she's everywhere all the time. We'll just use her audience to increase our reviews. Yeah.
Cool. So one option is to have an influencer or a thought leader in that space, the demographic, getting them to host the show,
Yeah.
and then kind of capturing that. I guess, Matt, and any other tips for maybe that isn't the route you want to go? Would you want to, have a strategic launch plan? What are some other marketing tactics you employ? I know you and I have talked a lot about like targeting on Facebook specifically, and with how you can target by device. Maybe some other aspects we can add to it.
Yeah, I can talk to that, and I don't know if you have anything to add before. So one of the interesting things that we talked about on several projects is the idea of orchestrating word of mouth through targeting. And so, the thinking here is that people notice when you send them, people notice when you send them a targeted message, but people also notice when you are taking the time to send them a direct message. And so, for example, this is twofold. So on the targeting side, if you think about, say, a 10-episode series, and you have 1 to 2 guests per episode, you have right there, let's say it's 2 guests, you have 20 separate audiences based on that guest's demographics and background. So, if one of the guests went to a university here, or they are based on a philanthropic organization, like finding the cure for blindness. Each guest has a unique thing in their background that's a passion point for a potential audience, and you can target based on that. So, for example, like in the example of the university, you can target alumni of that university, talking about that episode and saying, your alumni is featured in this episode. Tune in now. Hit that listen now button. So there's some really interesting ways of doing that on the paid side. And then on the organic side, we were talking about this earlier, but again, in thinking of this more as a branding play than like a marketing lever, the hustle of doing genuine outreach and having members on your team, all hands on deck type approach. We've seen examples where organizations have planned to have every member of their team, let's say it's a 500-person company, pick 10 people, friends and family and network, to send the podcast to. And it is this idea of, it's more like strategic word of mouth than orchestrating word of mouth. It's the idea of people will receive that and they'll tune in because they see how much you care about it. And it increases the intent to actually listen rather than just seeing something in their newsfeed, even if it is targeted. So it sounds like a lot of work, but the idea of sending a DM on Instagram or an email or a letter to interest groups, business groups, university clubs, with content related to what your topic goes a long way, surprisingly.
Shows how passionate you are. People resonate with that. Cool.
Yeah.
You want to add it? Don't have to control measurement.
I would like to add one thing. At Pacific Content, we talk a lot about the difference between preaching to the converted or growing the pie. And you mentioned earlier, 45% of people who say they've never listened to a podcast, 25% of people who say they listen regularly. Are you marketing your show to existing podcast listeners? Or are you marketing your show to people who have not yet found their new favorite show? And I think you need to develop different strategies for those different audiences. And tools like some of the targeting options on social platforms can help you do that. But thinking about what is my message for somebody who already listens to 5 minutes of podcasts a week? How is that different than somebody who has never listened to a podcast before? One of my favorite, and this is very guerrilla, and I would not necessarily recommend doing this. I got a guy named Mark Levis, who, as a passion project with his wife, did a children's book review podcast. It's called Just One More Book. They did 500 episodes of it. They did it because they loved it. Who is the show for? The parents of kids who were tired of reading terrible kids' books. How did they market their show? Through word of mouth. They also printed out, for not a lot of money, a bunch of bookmarks and went to their local chapters and went to the kids section and put bookmarks for their podcast inside a bunch of kids' books. The point is not like going to retail and use your existing space, but the point is if what you want to do is grow the pie and create more podcast listeners, you need to hit them where they live, and you need to give them a reason why. And what I love about Mark Levis's Just One More Book example is not that it was probably illegal, but that he hit people exactly where they were. He knew their pain point, which was reading all these crummy books to kids, and he had something to offer to help those people. That show spoke to people in a very particular audience, and he reached them in a very particular way. So if you can get people where they live and grow the pie for everybody wins.
I know, given the audience, that diversity is here, there's probably some specific questions about monetization, maybe growing your audience, but I definitely want to leave some time for Q&A. But I always love ending either a podcast interview or a panel discussion with a speed round. So I have a couple of questions for each of you, and then we'll open up to some Q&A. What's your favorite podcast? What's your favorite podcast other than your own? Okay.
I don't know. Studio Queens.
How I built this.
Disability After Dark with Andrew Crusoe from Toronto.
You can do the next one.
Okay, yeah.
What's the last podcast episode you listened to?
The ritual episode of your show on the way here.
Aww. He was prepared. He did the work.
It's a show called Akimbo by a man named Seth Godin, who is a marketing visionary, Hall of Fame in the ANA. And the episode was about marketing, so of course I looked through and like that's the one I'm going to listen to. But it was recommended to me earlier this week, and I listened to it on the flight, and unbelievable advice.
Last episode. So it was it's an old one, but it's a goodie. I subscribed to Using Brain on NPR. So good. And because of the election, I was listening to an old episode about political persuasion. So just like why people identify as left or as Democrat or Republicans. It's a little not applicable to Canada, but that was the last one. It was so great. Such a good podcast.
Cool. Do you remember the first podcast that you listened to that like got you into podcasting?
Oh yes. Oh my goodness, I forgot what it's called. It's BuzzFeed. It was a BuzzFeed podcast. It was 2 Black women. I don't know if it's no longer on the air. It was canceled like a year ago. Oh, it's gonna bother me. One's name is okay, I can't remember it. But it was so yeah. That's the first podcast I listened to. It's no longer around. It was 2 Black women who worked for BuzzFeed New York, and it was just about like the stupidest stuff ever. It was like Cardi B. Is she a feminist? And she like the coming up like hell on earth. It's just like stupid. It was just stupid stuff, but it was like good things to listen to when I was stressed at the end of the day. I was just like, I want to listen to some pop culture nonsense. So yeah. And then I'm like NPR, hidden brain now. Yeah.
What about you? What's the first podcast you listened to that got you into podcasting?
So mine is pretty expected, but the story is interesting. So This American Life, and it's actually the episode was kind of depressing. It was May 2008 episode about the financial crisis in the United States and everything that went into that and how it went down. But I was commuting to work at the time, and I had heard about podcasts, and I plugged in my little cassette adapter to my iPhone in the car and started playing it, and I was hooked.
Yeah, everybody wants up to with podcasting.
This is certainly not the first podcast I listened to, but there was an episode of This American Life that I think they called The Giant Pool of Money, which is about the financial crisis in 2008, and it birthed When and Money. It's the same thing. And it was not the first, but it was the thing that demonstrated to me the power of on-demand audio versus catching something on the radio in your car, right? It was the ability to tell a really deep, rich story, a really dense story, and you will find it.
I'm just Girl Boss. Does anybody listen to that? Yeah. That was my first podcast, and I have a podcast, and I'm obsessed with it all the time. Gateway. Any questions for this awesome audience we have in there? There you go. Yep.
I can pick up. So I actually have two questions that I want to share to get answers. So I'm a marketer from a brand perspective. And I want to know more about the stats around when people consume or listen to a podcast. Is it typically when they're announced or when they're scheduled to come out, or is it, within a week, within 48 hours, etc.? And the second question I have is, as a marketer, I think it's a good idea to get into advertising for a podcast. But I don't know how to convey that to the powers that be of the checkbook from an ROI perspective.
You should probably talk about the first one, and I have an idea for the second one.
The first question was around.
You're really into the stats. You know a lot.
But
The quick answer is I don't know, but there is research on it, and come find me afterwards. I can pull this in.
I think it's like 70% of people who download a podcast will listen to it in the first 24 hours they download it, something like that. But then most people just like click on a podcast and listen to it right away. And so yes, you want to click or subscribe and all that, but a lot of people are just like looking for something to listen to right this second. So I think that's when like keywords and like having a strong title and stuff in your podcast can be really important, because in that second someone's like looking for that topic. That's what I've read. You want to add anything?
So I think, yes, there is some research out there, and I take your word for that. I think it's so dependent on the content, right? There is evergreen content out there, and there are shows that are designed to have an incredibly long shelf life, and people go deep into the back catalog. And we're going to show where more than half of our monthly downloads come from back catalog downloads, right? Because people discover the show, and then they go way back and listen to all of that. Whereas I'm subscribed to World Report from CBC and the new daily show from CBC called Front Burner, right? I don't know how useful those episodes are going to be to me 6 months from now. So I think, yes, there is probably research out there, but it is so dependent on the content and the intended shelf life of the content that I think a bird's eye view of it is not going to be particularly
Cool. What about getting your mom to pay for advertising to it?
Yeah, and I think your question was about running ads in podcasts, right? So I also don't know the number, but there are several very compelling that have gotten lots of covered stats around how much people don't bother to skip podcast ads. But more importantly, there are intent lift numbers around people either surveyed or test and control saying that like they influence them. And that is part of what interested me initially so much in getting into podcasts professionally, is that people for now are really paying attention to this, perhaps these ads, perhaps more than anywhere else, from that channel perspective. And then the other thing that we've had a lot of conversations about is host reads versus audio clips. So the easiest way to pull off a audio ad is work in Letter mechanically and run a clip. Run either a 30-second mid-roll or a 15-second pre-roll that you have produced or that you've written yourself. The host reads work much better. It lends credibility. As a listener, it doesn't sound as much like an interruption. Sometimes they add their own personality and humor, particularly if you're a brand and you give them the flexibility to riff. Anecdotally, I think I've seen examples where, you know, a few brands have given bullet talking points rather than a formulaic script. And it pays off.
So speaking going off of like the evergreen topic in about how to podcast, it's also important to design your podcast in a way where it doesn't become dated too quickly. So with Elbow First, we purposely interview people who are on the cusp of a new industry, new sector, or who have launched a new product that is bound to change the industry overall. So like Ritual, like I know in Canada that's well known, but they just received like a huge Series C funding and they're expanding in the US. So there's a huge group of people who are going to notice them for the first time. And then when he's ridiculously rich and the next Zuckerberg, people will go back and be like, I wonder what he was like when the company was only 3 years old. So if you design a podcast that will last and test and you will endure the test of time, you're also ensuring that there's more bang for the buck for the sponsor who will end up supporting it.
There, the upper side room.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how do you find your interview subjects? Do you work with publicists who are pitching people to you, or?
Yeah.
So that's like one of the best parts of being a producer and not just a host of a podcast, is the fact that you get to choose side. I feel like people are going to pitch me a lot after I say that. So that's part of it. So I purposely make myself accessible. So if you go to my Twitter or my Instagram account or my personal website, it has my email address, and I am always asking for pitches from people, and especially from women in people of color, because it's important to show a diverse group of people. But I think the most important thing is knowing how to pitch properly. Because if you don't want to pitch properly, you're just wasting your time and possibly upsetting that PR person or that host, etc. I know with myself, because I get like hundreds of emails, I always say, like, you know, I don't have a lot of time, so you have to be upfront as to why you should be on the podcast, what makes you special, and also ensure that I haven't done a podcast about the same thing recently, because then it makes it look like you're not even listening to the show at all.
Yeah, maybe a question. So I am obsessed with multi-part or serial podcasts. I find that the amount that exists cannot last with those things. And I was wondering if that's normal, because I know my husband loves episodic, one-off, those interview formats, like news topical. So the reason I ask is, it's true that people love that. There's a reason why, I guess the reason why you guys love players, but is that like a good opportunity to do things that are multi-episode? I just love the feeling of, I think when it's podcast, and I love it. It was so sad. It's terrible. I'm sure I've done it. I love the feeling of like, knowing I have another podcast. It's rather not entertaining if you are thinking about creating a podcast of 20 hours and like serial
So I love this question, and I think about it all the time. And when we work with clients, I tend to put stuff on a spectrum from Game of Thrones to Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. Okay? So thank you for that. They are both great, right? So Game of Thrones comes out once a year if you're lucky. And it's a limited number of episodes, extremely high production values. No two episodes are alike. It's very complex. It's very rich. It's like, this is prestige television over here. It's good. And there's Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy that have both been running for decades, are highly formatted, have been the same way forever, are on every single weeknight. Right. And neither end of the spectrum is wrong, but I think what can be really instructive is watching how HBO markets Game of Thrones versus how your local TV station markets Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. So, do you want to be the once-a-year event that is a new season of Game of Thrones? Or do you want to be a reliable drip, drip, drip show like Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy? I think when it comes to brands, particularly brands that produce audio content, with any kind of regularity, the golden place to be is part of somebody's routine, part of somebody's habit. Like, there is a reason why Misener Live comes out every single week, rain or shine. There is a reason why people like you feel sad when Serial is over, or when S-Town wraps up with a somewhat unsatisfying conclusion. You know, like, so often, when I see this through this sort of podcast marketing lens, and the question that I often ask clients is, as an institution, are you better at marketing regular, ongoing, habit-forming shows, or are you better at marketing big events where everything leads up to one day? And I think the good news for everybody in the room is, we were talking earlier about launch strategies, and there's no formula. But the good news is a lot of the work around thinking how to market a media property, particularly a media property coming from a brand, a lot of this work has already been done by people working in other media, right? So if you're making a limited run series, go watch how HBO markets Game of Thrones. If you're making a show that is going to run every week forever until you fall over, go study how they market Wheel of Fortune and how they market a specific episode of Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy. Is it series level marketing? Is it episode level marketing? Right? So like, look at how they market book launches. Look at how they market films when they come out. Right? Like, you can steal a lot of the work that has already been done by other people working in other media. And I can tell you that the people who work at Apple, the people who work at Spotify, the people who work at these large platforms are increasingly using the language of TV, film, book launches, music launches. Right? We were talking earlier about Jim Smith and also on Instagram. That's an interesting thing. What is the podcast version of that? Study other media. That's not really
I would also just add, I live in New York City, and I have seen several podcasts who are taking the HBO Game of Thrones strategy now with marketing. So like on my commute to work, like before I get in the subway, I would see ads, out of home ads, for Primetown, I think it was. These are Gimlet run podcast ads, and they're turning it into like a moment, not a living radar, but an event to aspire to. But that requires a lot of budget. And to the point around episodic versus serialized, like, it is enormously more difficult in many cases to produce a full story arc over the course of the season than a per episode. And that's probably why you can listen to more than there are out there. It's simply because it's a whole different level of production investment.
This is for Dan. Do you have any diary pages in your back pocket that you can say for us?
That is kind of you. But no, I'm sorry. I do a show called Burn Ups where you think there as kids were children, who were once children, get up on stage as adults and read childhood diaries. Thank you for listening to the show.
I admire that, right? You were there. Yes.
I'm just curious, how does someone, let's say, I was going to start a podcast, when it comes to monetization, it's kind of like when you're ready to do the marketing and branding, you don't really know what everyone else is getting paid. But when it comes, and often it's follower count or reach, but when it comes to podcasts, how do you know, like, is there a set thing, like, if this podcast is getting 50,000 views, and that's when you can start monetizing? Is there a limit? Is there a starting point? And what would the value be in that? Like, is there anything that is just you know for the industry when talking to your clients as to what they're doing and how they're able to monetize? Or is there sort of an industry standard like there is in other platforms?
I can talk about my experience in monetizing my podcast and like doing some research. You guys can share your personal experiences. So for me, like 3 letters that I paid is CPM, which is like cost per 1,000 impressions. When you're starting a podcast and you're not getting 1,000 downloads, like, and you see that that's like a couple dollars, that's like a really discouraging feeling. So I stopped paying attention to that, and I decided to think about, okay, who is my audience? And something that I've learned from monetizing my podcast is it's less draws people to my experience. It's less about the number of people listening to, it's more about you really know who is listening to that podcast. So for me, you know, I've had brands come to me who said, hey, you know, we're interested in what you're doing, and those brands are never a fit for my show. It's always like trying to make it work, like a cannabis company would work with illegal, like trying to say freedom lifestyle would fit, and I was like, I don't think that works. But when I go out of my way to pitch a brand, and I can say, hey, freedom lifestyle, it's about, you know, millennial women who don't want to have a 9 to 5, who, you know, want to make money, work wherever, whenever, and think about the brands that are willing to pay for that audience, it was way more successful. WeWork has been a sponsor of my podcast, Fiverr was the first person. So from my experience, it's about going to the brands first, knowing for them to come to you, really know who your audience is, and then also think about like multi-touch opportunities. So I don't just lead with my downloads, I lead with my Instagram account, I lead with my email newsletter list, I lead with my Facebook group I lead, I do live podcast meetings, we can be a sponsor of that. So I give them like a multi-touch experience, and then I put a price scholar that like I think is fair for that. And from my experience, whew, I'm not rich, but I'm high paying sponsors, and that's like really worked well for me. Anybody else got monetization?
I feel like everyone's looking at me right now because I work for the Globe. I don't get excited for that, all of it. Thank you. Okay, so for the Globe, I mean, there's only so much I can say about that. I mean, when it comes to monetizing the podcast, I'll just be like completely upfront and say that because the Globe does this for a living, like they have partners and sponsors that with relationships that go beyond, you know, my lifetime, they have already that preset. And when they approached me, because again, when I was talking about being authentic, I had been in this space for a very long time, and I've written, I don't know, over 100 tech stories just within the last couple of years. I was able to use that to my advantage when it came to discussing my participation in the podcast. But when it comes to sponsors, yeah, there are people that they've worked with in the past, so they have set rates regardless of me.
Yeah, Paula. I'll keep it easy. But I'm curious about remarketing podcasts. Like I know it's law, like you go through the content, change it up a little, repost it. How does remarketing podcasts work? Is that even a possibility? Is that something people look to do? Because at the state once, I can't imagine you like going back to it unless you're a really big fan of whoever's doing the interview or something like that. I know I have to do that I constantly go back to because I feel like I keep learning from them. And is there a strategy to do that? Is there a way to make that work?
So when you say remarketing, what does that mean? You mean like the podcast has been in existence for a while and you want to revamp it?
Yeah, or like republicize it?
Oh, republish it?
Market it to that.
Like market to a new audience again? Okay. I think maybe this is.
So I think this comes back to the question earlier around the longevity and the shelf life of a show. So let's presume you've got content that is reasonably evergreen. I hear Planet Money do this all the time. And if you're a regular listener to Planet Money, you know that every once in a while, they will republish a story that they originally reported 6, 7, 8 years ago. And they're not linking back to the original update. They are taking that audio, playing it mostly in its entirety, but with updates. So if there's a topical story that calls back to something that happened a long time ago, they will repackage it and republish it. And from the perspective of analytics platforms, so there's 2 distinct episodes. There's no real connection between the 2 episodes. But if you're looking for a model for this, I think Planet Money is one place to start. And I think, it's useful to think not just about podcast marketing as you're marketing your show, but to think about a number of different levels of it. So am I doing always on series level marketing where part of the message is this show exists and it's for you for these reasons? And to Matt's point earlier about finding communities of people who are built around an idea or a cause, thinking about episode level marketing. And episode level marketing can happen at any. Certainly it's most relevant when marketing an episode that's at the top of your feed and is the most recently published thing, but there is absolutely no reason why you cannot build a campaign around a particularly good old episode. So for instance, I do this show, Grown Ups Do Things They Wrote as Kids. We did a special Halloween episode, which is full of weird ghost stories written by children. That Halloween episode is just going to be as Halloween next Halloween, and in 5 years, and in 10 years. And you can bet that next October, I'm not going to make a whole new Halloween special. I don't need to. I've already got one, and there are a bunch of people who haven't heard it yet. And there are going to be people who find my show a month from now who will never have heard that. So think about episode level marketing and really bringing some extra downloads out of your existing catalog. I think this is one of the places where people fall down the most, because as podcasters, we're often focused on what's the latest, what's the newest, and we ignore the value that probably built out in content a lot.
Yeah, and I'll just add on that and say, like, essentially what Dan just said was targeting and seasonality. So you have, an old Halloween episode that, okay, so next fall, you can target a new segment of people, exclude the group that tuned in prior or that saw your ads prior, and reach a whole new group with the same content. Additionally, like, I've worked on a project where a brand ran, as Dan mentioned, an always-on campaign at the same time in parallel to episode specifics. So let's say their episode is launched every 2 weeks. They're launching an episode. They have a campaign, an ad campaign that's talking about that episode throughout the season, and you can compare the performance. And so, like, you may find that one particular episode or content drives more interest and more tune-in. Then, when your season is over, you're done posting live episodes, you can build a new strategy based on the performance of the ads, of the promotion of your current season.
Okay, last question, because what the best thing about having an event at WeWork is the beer and cider that comes out because it's on tap. So we're going to do one more question, and then we're going to have like 20 minutes left to have more conversations one-on-one with you all in the back. Oh, yeah.
So as a marketer, if I decide to approach a podcaster and I want to sell a product or service on his podcast, so like is there like a proper number? Like what happens is sometimes if we mention the product or service too often, the audience listening to it thinks like this is all promoted. Whereas if I mention it like just once or twice, people might not recollect it so often and think that, okay, it was just something and might miss out on this.
It's a great one.
I will say that's where the blog comes in for I'll go first. So with every podcast, there is a company good piece. And I think that's a way, there's only so much I can fit into one episode. So the written content, which appears online and in the paper, is a great way for people to go back and if they want to learn more about a certain restaurant or a certain product, they can go on the article, click on it, and also find out more information about where it is in their community, etc. So that's how we kind of work around that. Of course, like we mention products, but they're not sponsored, but we do understand that readers will want to learn more about it. And it doesn't feel like it's too pitchy, it's more organic. It's like, oh, you want to learn about that? There's an entire website dedicated to everything that we talk about in the podcast.
I can take this from a brand perspective. So not necessarily selling a product or a service, but we've commissioned a bunch of original research with our research partner Audience Insights based here in Toronto. And we have found that somewhat surprisingly, an extremely light brand touch still results in pretty incredible brand recall, aided and unaided. You do not need to hit people over the head with a hammer in podcast land. Like, no, podcast listeners are smart, and they know what an infomercial smells like. They know what an ad or a brochure looks and feels like. And I think stuff that feels a little too infomercial is absolutely going to turn some people off. And the research that we've seen suggests that even an incredibly like brand touch, where the brand is mentioned once, twice an episode at the beginning and the end, still results in very, very impressive brand recall. So do not need to slow check this stuff.
Okay, it's going off that, and so true. Because like that podcast, which I cannot remember the name of, the two black women from New York, Underground? Another round. Oh my god, yes! Another round. That's why he's the man. Okay, yeah, it's called Another Round. I remember one episode they were talking about mattresses by Casper, and I still remember the brand name. They mentioned it only twice in the episode, the beginning and the end, and afterwards, I remember like a week later, I was like Googling Casper mattresses. I was like, what the? I don't even need this. But yeah, light touch. I didn't even need a mattress, but I was like, let's see what's going on. Yeah.